everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to do something a little bit different and break all the rules in the conference and ask you to take your phones out right now. We're going to do a little live polling, and I'm going to hand it over to Natalie to get you started.
Hi, everyone. If you could please take out your cell phones, and we're going to do some live polling. It's very easy. What you have to do is text the phone number 22333 with the code DoverCole516. This will connect you to our live polling just for the moment while we do this presentation. It'll log out right after, but you'll be able to text on that system and have your answers show up live on the screen. So again, the message you're sending is DoverCole516 at the phone number 22333. If anyone is having any issues sending this message or sending this text, please raise your hand and we'll have some volunteers go around and help you out. If anybody's having any issues, please raise your hand. So again, the phone number 22333 with the message DoverCole516, DOVERKOHL 516. All right. Once you send it, if you've done it successfully, you should receive this message, but you don't have to do anything there. You'll just be able to text straight away, either A, B, C, or D. Right. And your answers will go straight there. So we'll start off with what is your community association? So what is your community association? A, science, B, business, C, government, D, local community, and E, other. So as you can see, it's starting to pull up. We're seeing a half and half split between government and local community, with a lot of people in science and some in other. Is there anybody in other that would like to say what other they're part of? Other? All right, cool. This is the next question is, are you an active member of the Hold the Line Coalition? A, yes, B, no, and C, no, but I would like to be. The answer, A, yes, B, no, and C, no, but I would like to be. All right. No. Majority of the panel is from the Hold the Line Coalition, so you'll get to hear a little bit about what the Hold the Line Coalition is. That's good. All right. Next question, why is land use and smart growth important for Biscayne Bay health? So this is an open-ended question. You could text in why you believe that the land use and smart growth is important for Biscayne Bay health. We're getting answers coming in, which is Bay health equals human health, pollution reduction, water quality. Some land must be wetlands to give Biscayne Bay breathing room. Impacts on wildlife spread. Answers. Both impact to health of the bay, water quality, a lot of water quality. What happens when land ends up in the water? And then the answers will keep trickling in as we go through. Aquifer. Water retention, prevention equals amounts of care. All right, perfect. So put in your last answers and then we'll move on to the next once these are set in. Perfect. The next one. Now we'll start up the Hold the Line Coalition presentation.
Hi, again, my name is Josh Sproat. I'm the policy director with the Hold the Line Coalition. Just a little bio of the coalition before I let the panelists introduce themselves. We have been around since 2004. Our mission is to promote smart growth principles in Miami-Dade County. We're primarily centered around working with the urban development boundary, which is a line that helps to constrain urban growth in the county to preserve our natural spaces, our rural areas, and the Biscayne Bay watershed. You may not know, but we are actually, we have a mandate to grow in Florida. In the Florida statute, there is a requirement that localities plan for 10 years of population growth. So what it doesn't do is tell us how we have to do that growth. We can continue to sprawl out as we have in the past, or we can chart a smarter way forward that helps to conserve our natural resources, keep living affordable for everyone, and promote the smart land use principles that Coalition fights for and that everybody in this room knows will make is connected to the health of Biscayne Bay. So those are our two options. On the left, you can see our current urban development boundary. We'd like to keep it there. And if you're familiar with Miami-Dade County, you can see some of the Everglades in Biscayne Bay are, it creates a barrier and a buffer between those areas and our urbanized footprint. But in the past, we haven't done a great job of holding the line. The urban development boundary is the line in the Hold the Line Coalition. As you can see, we have added a lot of space available for urban expansion, increased hardscape, and new activities into our previous open spaces. So, we do a lot of activities at the Hold the Line Coalition to help to hold that line. We do direct outreach to elected officials. We organize with other nonprofit organizations. We do a lot of public education. Probably all know we have a lot of tools in the toolbox to try to affect public policy. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but sometimes the political process gets it wrong. And when it does, sometimes we have to go to court. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. My name is Elizabeth Fatah Carpenter, and I'm the Executive Director of the Everglades Law Center. I'm also a Land Steering Committee member, and thanks so much for having me today. I was hoping to talk to you all about two significant pieces of litigation that the Hold the Line Coalition and other advocacy partners have been involved in. And one of those is the 836 highway extension, and the other one is the South Dade Logistic and Technology District. So you may have heard of one or both of these. Oh, for the slides, thank you. Fancy. So both of these development threats were the Hold the Line Coalition and partner advocates chose to pursue these through litigation because they have the potential to threaten both the Everglades and Biscayne Bay, the inland specifically situated for restoration of both of those. And so not surprisingly are also both included in the only Everglades restoration plan or the only Everglades restoration project designed to protect the Everglades and Biscayne Bay, which is called BBCR, or the Biscayne Bay Southeastern Everglades Ecosystem Restoration Plan. And so these aren't just, a random development threat that we don't like because of some minor implication. Both of these developments could significantly impact our work on Everglades restoration and the health of Biscayne Bay. So the first one of them is the 836 highway extension, and we're a few years into this one. If you guys take a look at the map on the left, you can see the red line is the proposed highway extension, and the black line is the urban development boundary. So the state proposed a 14-mile, 6-lane highway outside of the urban development boundary in Everglades wetlands, endangered environmental lands, habitat for endangered species, and in a well field protection area that supplies the drinking water for all of Miami-Dade County. So not a great place, in our opinion, for a highway. Okay. So we saying, well, okay, well, just so on the left, you can see the color differentiate. It kind of helps show the urban development boundary. The darker green, right, is agriculture and environmental endangered lands, wetlands, and that's where the highway is going versus the urban area on the right. And the photo on the right shows the overlay of the highway over our West Wildfield protection area. Again, not a great place for a highway. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so the next slide, you can see the natural post-Everglades restoration, which we're not done with, but we're in the heart of. This is the flow of water from the north to the south. right over the land that the highway was proposed on. And that's the square that you guys can see. So again, very important piece of land here. Despite the best efforts of amazing advocates, the highway project was approved. And so the Hold the Line Coalition, Laura and Richard Grosso and Paul Schwepp, challenged the approval of the highway. And the way that you would challenge developments that violate the county's comprehensive development management plan is by filing a petition in administrative court. So these wonderful advocates filed the petition in administrative court, huge lift against a very counterbalanced parties with resources, and actually won. So one in front of the administrative law judge, who said, this highway violates Miami-Dade County's own comprehensive development management plan, which says you can't build in Everglades land, you can't threaten our wellfields, you can't threaten endangered species, and you shouldn't build a highway outside of the urban development boundary. Unfortunately, when the administration commission, the higher court after that essentially, got that order saying that it was inconsistent, the administrative commission, who's the governor and the cabinet, overturned it and said, nope, you're good, you can pass that highway. So that was appealed to the appellate court, and it's currently pending in the appellate court before the 3rd District Court of Appeals. And again, this is all, Everglades Law Center was not involved in this up until this point. At that point, Everglades Law Center filed an amicus brief on behalf of, which is a Friends of the Court brief, to help explain why this particular piece of land was so important to Biscayne Bay. We filed that on behalf of 1,000 Friends of Florida, Miami Waterkeeper, and Friends of the Everglades. And we are currently waiting for that decision right now from the 3rd District Court of Appeals saying whether or not this highway was appropriately approved. So TBD.
We fought this since 2013, this highway idea. So it's a long time.
And yes, and another great image here is the interference of this particular development with BBCR. You can see the green square there. The highway would have been right inland, needed for Everglades restoration and restoration of Biscayne Bay. So that was the first challenge, still waiting on that. The second case we wanted to talk about was the South Dade Logistic and Technology District. Incredible showing from environmental advocates, community members, and partners opposing this project. And this project, here's a great outline, is actually in South Dade, outside of the urban development boundary, once again. And you can kind of see, it's hard to contextualize it, but it's just east of the Turnpike. And north of the Air Force Base and the Turkey Point facility. So developers came to the county commission and said, we want to develop 800 acres of agricultural land that is specifically slated for Everglades restoration. We want to put an industrial site on that. And not only do we want to put an industrial site on that, but we want to move the urban development boundary to encompass this area. So they'll buy super cheap land because it's outside of the UDB, move the land, raise the value of the land. And the next slide's BBC, right? So really adding insult to injury on this property, we're much further in the process now than we were in 2013 with this particular development threat. And this particular portion of land is in every BBCR alternative that we have come, and it is one of the best performing features that we have in BBCR. This land is supposed to be turned into a water preservation area that will provide clean, slow release fresh water to South Biscayne Bay and really, really help restore that ecosystem. So obviously we didn't want this project to move forward. So unfortunately, when the county commission, despite the recommendations against it from their own staff, the federal government and the state government approved the project, although there were a few wonderful commissioners that did not. We challenged it in administrative court in the same way that we did with these wonderful folks did with the 836 highway extension. We challenged the administrative courts, and while we were waiting in administrative court, this is about 2 years ago now, it turns out that the state of Florida was also paying very close attention to this because they opposed it, and they sent a letter to the county and said, you actually didn't vote in time. And the project was not successfully approved because you didn't vote in time. As a result, the county then sued the state of Florida saying, we don't agree with your decision that it wasn't appropriately approved. And we intervened on behalf of our client, Nita Lewis, in that case to support the state's position that you need to follow the law. It wasn't appropriately approved, and succeeded. And so we won in that case, and that is now also under appeal in the Third District Court of Appeals. And we're working on the briefing for that right now. But the great part about this case, I know I'm talking too long. The great part about this case is that even if we lose this current appeal about the timing issue, we still have the administrative case to fall back on, saying that this is inappropriate in this place. You need to follow your own comp plan.
No, that was great. Thank you. So, that's sort of an example of what happens when, we get land use wrong during the political process. But Laura, would you tell us a little bit about where we are with some of the other major projects in the political administrative process and what's coming down the pipeline for Biscayne Bay restoration?
Well, there's a few projects I'd like to get to, but one of the transitions here is that during this process, we actually looked at data to see, okay, everybody thinks farmland is bad for Biscayne Bay. It really loads chemicals into the bay. So we started to look at all these pieces of land in the 102 basin. And we realized that farmland on the edge, as well as the mangrove fringe, was absorbing the nitrogen that was coming from the city and some of the farmland, up into the canal shed. And so we put that in our white paper. If you're interested in it, it's still on our website. But what that told us is that just protecting farmland for Biscayne Bay is important, which most of us get wrong. Advocates in this room are all thinking, well, that's where the pollution comes from. Well, open land is absorbing a certain amount of nutrients. So just keep that in mind when we're also advocating to protect agriculture. So I wanted to show you some of these images that we made to sort of make the point that we are absorbing a lot of nutrients with the farmland. The restoration itself will absorb more. And so what's at stake now is a lot of farmland, actually, thousands of acres that are being proposed for development. One project alone is over 1,000 acres. So these are the recommendations coming out of the county for how many acres we need, and we're coming dangerously close to those numbers. Wetlands, of course, are really coming up first to answer your question, Josh. We've got 70 acres that are being proposed for development. And, if you guys are familiar with the Sackett decision, if it's not connected to surface water, it's potentially vulnerable. The state hasn't changed that yet, but we saw North Carolina do it. We saw Manatee County do it. These will be, I'm sure they'll make these slides available to you so you could watch that clip, but we don't have time for that now. I'm going to flip through it. But we're actually directing developers to develop in wetlands. Over half of our proposed future growth areas or urban expansion areas are in wetlands and in low-lying areas. So number one, maybe in Joan Browder's honor, we should remove all wetlands from the future growth areas in Dade County. Why are we directing developers to go to the very place that's going to clean the water, hold the water when there's flooding and rain, and recharge our aquifer? These are the things that we need to protect. So if we need a future place to grow, maybe it should be next to a transit corridor instead. And this area in red is actually been proposed but failed. So this coming year, we're going to have the opportunity to change our growth plan, our CDMP. It's called Evaluation Appraisal Report. We're going to be able to help to define what our future comprehensive master plan is. So we want you to all get involved with us in the fall. We'll talk more about that. These are the projects that were filed this year alone. It's about 300 acres of wetlands and about 800 acres of agriculture in these projects. This one is the one that's coming up next. The community council meeting is supposed to be May 28th. It may get postponed. The recommendation from the county is not ready yet. But this is 70 acres of wetlands right now that we can stand up together and take action on. So that's what's coming right now in the next month.
And just as you're looking at this slide, to be clear, that 70 acres of wetland is sort of the rectangular one in the bottom right-hand corner. If you look into the center and you see the green one just to the east of that, That was 40 acres of wetlands that was already approved for development last year. And up to the top there, that's more than 200, which hasn't entered the decision-making process yet, but an application has been filed. So that gives you an idea of what is, coming into the pipeline for development applications right now, just for wetlands, not for all of the applications that have been filed to move the urban development boundary or expand permitted uses into agricultural areas and other open lands. All right. Yeah.
So I forgot to mention, what we hear all the time is, well, these wetlands aren't being used for an Everglades restoration project. So it's okay, right, to park trucks on them. No, it's not okay. And I'll tell you why. Because the water table itself is all connected. So if you're trying to take water off the landscape to avoid flooding, you have to have a place to put the water. If we continue to pave over wetlands, we'll continue to have flooding problems. So it's critical to protect all the wetlands, not just those that are needed for a restoration project. And that is something we have to fight for. It's not okay, just like the song, to pave over a parking lot, pave over paradise for a parking lot. And this is exactly what is being proposed.
And if I could just ask a follow-up, Laura. So, you've talked about some of the restoration projects, why we need to keep these lands available, given the long timeframes involved. Could you just kind of maybe tie that together real quickly for everyone about the connections, our theme today, between that and successful Biscayne Bay restoration?
Sure. So I can answer that in two parts. One is it takes like 20 to 30 years to do a restoration project. And in the meantime, we're not exactly sure what the project footprint looks like. And so the best thing we can do is actually purchase those lands in advance. So brilliant idea that the mayor has with bonding to purchase land. One of the things we should advocate for is just buying up wetlands. Buy them up. I don't want to have to fight for them for the rest of my life. Let's just buy them up. They don't have to be Everglades lands. They can be purchased. And they don't have to be environmentally endangered lands. It could be farmland that we're buying up that we think might be important for restoration in the future. That's the one tool in our toolbox that I think is a worthwhile investment, but it's also the hardest because it's expensive. So I think that that's one thing that we should be doing more of. And we should also start to think of those ecosystem services that these properties provide. Just holding water off the landscape is so critical. And we're only valuing it for the food that's being grown there. But imagine that whole farmland being paved and developed and all those services that we would lose. And so definitely start valuing farmland. Of course, wetlands are important, but farmland is also super important.
All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome Maribel Balbin. She's our newest steering committee member at the Hold the Line Coalition. We've talked about the legal aspect. We've talked about some of the policies that are coming down the line, some of the things we can do to help preserve Biscayne Bay and the Everglades and our other open spaces. But we used a lot of acronyms. We used a lot of technical talk doing it. And none of this gets done without political will and public engagement and understanding and the desire to share the goals that we have. So, Maribel, what are some of the obstacles to, communicating some of these tricky to talk about concepts, to people who have limited time, limited attention, and, what can we do better to do so?
Thank you so much. And yes, I am new to the group. Although not new to the issues, my professional life was spent in government, first with the Water Management District through the whole Everglades restoration projects, doing outreach to the 16 county areas. And then I spent some time in Miami-Dade County doing water conservation, actually developing the document to meet the requirements of the consumptive use permit for the Water Management District. And a lot of outreach from the government side when the government wants to sell you a project. I'm on the other side now when the government is not doing it, how do we get that done from the government? And also, how do we get actually the community involved and aware, because it's all about awareness of what's going on. We talked about briefly earlier and during this week about the fact that we have an additional challenge because we live in this community, a community that has new people coming in every day. I was telling some people this week that if from 2021 to the end of 2023, over 300,000 Cubans arrived in Miami, just Cubans. That you add the 50-some thousand Venezuelans, the 20-some thousand Haitians, we have probably almost 500,000 people absorbed in the last 3 days, in 3 years rather, that don't speak the language, that are going to be impacting our environment on a daily basis and having no information about how anything works or how anything impacts them and how what they do impacts the environment itself. I was also commenting on this third wheel that we have. If you have an item at the county commission and you have a UDB expansion issue, like the last one that was a really big deal because it was about jobs that were being created in the South Dade area. If you don't listen to Spanish radio, you do not know what goes on there. And what happens is that those people that listen to Spanish radio are the constituents of at least 6 of the county commissioners. And then those commissioners are going to the radio also to agree with what the constituents are saying. And the constituents are only hearing to one side of the story, which is the fact that there is this group opposing bringing jobs to South Dade. And jobs wins over what they don't know. They do not know what the water issues are, everything that we have been listening to here this morning, right? And another thing I wanted to say, in every panel, I've sort of visited almost all the panels. In every single one of them, the conversation was about how do we reach the public? How do we get the public to know? How do we get to more awareness? And we have a huge challenge right here in our community. The people that are here, I'm impressed by, we have almost 100 people here. There's like 3.2 million people in Miami-Dade County. And if it's happening in South Dade, the people in Hialeah have no idea. They don't hear it. They don't talk about it. It doesn't impact me. So the challenge is to how do we communicate that message that whatever happened in South Dade does impact you all the way in Miami Beach, right? And I was listening to a presentation from the Miami-Dade County Library System. There was a great presenter that the program that she's running. And what I was thinking is that we need to connect more the dots and those programs that are reaching out to certain communities to make sure that they share all of the issues. Because we have these silos on this different, oh, I'm this this particular organization does this and this particular organization does that. I talk about the bay or I talk about trees. And we need to have, for those that are reaching out for so many people, we need to have some connectivity and messaging that will be less of the alphabet soup that we talked at the beginning, more of communicating how does impact me. I mean, the whole outreach concept is, okay, I have an issue that I want you to know about it, but I want you to know about how it impacts you so that then you can act on it. And that's the goal for, at least from my part of the work.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right, we got a round of applause. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maribel. Okay, our theme is connections. I want to give you all the opportunity, something that you connected with today. This can be, sort of your final thoughts. We've got another round of audience polling to get to as well. But before we do that, I'll just go first. What the work we do with land planning and long-term land planning, the previous panel that was here, if you happen to be in this room, talked about a lot of incredible projects that we can do, on the kind of tactical, hyper-local level to help restore Biscayne Bay. And so the connection for me was, the work that we do to make sure that those spaces are available as these new techniques, new green infrastructure, new gray infrastructure when appropriate comes online is available in order to implement them and so that we can have that comprehensive approach to restoration. So I want to thank the previous panel and everybody else who's participated for that. And who'd like to go first with their connection for today and their final thought?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I think, I mean, just to build on that wonderful discussion about education and the difficulty in explaining the interconnectedness of the ecosystem to people, that kind of struck me throughout the conference. I'd be listening to someone talk about an issue in a completely different part of Biscayne Bay or a completely different part of Miami-Dade County at the granular level and think that actually has something to do with the South Dade Logistics Center and South Biscayne Bay. And the education piece and the interconnected piece, obviously our theme of the day, I just can't stress enough. And I don't know how we bridge those, but you know, we gotta, to help people in the north, you gotta help people in the south and vice versa. And that, you know, what we do in the Everglades impacts Biscayne Bay and vice versa. And I was so happy to hear that theme being, you know, espoused throughout the conference.
Sort of the same feeling that you had, but a little different take. So you mentioned the word silo. This is a common problem. It's been a problem throughout my entire career, where you might even be working on the same thing, but you're not talking to each other. And I think that in order for us to make a difference, we have to come together. We have to connect, and that's all sectors. You know, I noticed like even this audience where maybe you haven't heard of the Hold the Line Coalition, you're not part of it. So we want to take some time polling to find out, you know, how can we do better? Obviously, we want to connect with you. We want to remove those silos. And so even if it's not today, you could reach out to any of us to tell us, how do we remove those silos better? How can we meet you where you are? That was my take home theme for today, is how to better do that. Because even though this is just one day where we're all together and we're talking about everything, every single day we have so many threats that it's not happening on a regular basis. So I'd like to figure out how to do that better. So let us know.
Okay, I'm just going to follow up on the different groups that we're trying to reach. And historically, I was thinking, for example, and I'm going to totally date myself on this, but Keep Day Beautiful was a campaign years and years ago that made children learn recycling. And it was a huge project from the state that the county adopted. There was money, the schools had all this program, and kids were the ones that were policing the homes about recycling. I mean, it was a really effective program. So as we talk about the importance of the connectivity of what happens in one area impacts the other and the water quality issues, and how do we get people to love the Bay? Because we need to develop a love for the Bay. I mean, in San Francisco, everybody knows the Bay. The Bay is something that's part of them. We have not built that connectivity between us and the Bay. The big thing was about how many billions of dollars is produces. I mean, everybody remembering the number, 65 billion economic impact, the Bay. That's the only thing that I've heard people outside the inside baseball talk about when they talk about the Bay. So I think more of a coordination as to what our children in schools, the programs that we have. And then on the other end of it is people that vote. Because when we have these decisions made at the county commission level, is based on who votes for them. So a better education and better information to the actual voters, which in this case, I'm sorry, but it's the older people in the county. People in the middle don't vote. So it's reaching out to the children, see how we can impact the older population to see that we can impact the changes and get the votes that we need when we brought up to a county commission board.
And now we would like to connect with all of you all. So we have some more polling questions. If you hadn't seen before, if you're new to the room, you're texting the phone number 22333, the code DoverCool 516, and you'll be connected to this polling system through text. So the question is, what is the best way for the coalition to engage individuals around land use? So A, through social media, B, through newsletters, C, through community events, and D, other. So is there one that you're leaning towards that you think would be a good way for us to engage all of you? Through social media, through newsletters, through community events, or is there something else that we haven't thought of? So you could text A, B, C, or D to that number if you're new to the room. All right. It looks like we're seeing a lot of social media come up, a lot of community events.
And help us connect to you. So please take out your cell phones. And if you don't know the number, what was it again?
The number is 22333. So 2 2s and 3 3s. And you'll be texting the code Dover Coal, DOVER KOHL 516. It's a little message at the top. That's exactly what I mean. And then through that, you could vote on here. So we'll move on to the next question. Will you take action to protect wetlands today? A, yes, or B, no, next time. You could also scan this code, and it's a QR code that you take with a picture with your phone, and you'd be able to link straight to taking action for the wetlands right now.
So we also have this code available on a little handout. I think, Scott, I think you've got a few of them. If you can't get it from the screen, we can hand one out to you. That way you can take, basically you're signing a petition against that property that I put up on the screen. 70 acres, it's coming within a month. It's already set for community council. We're just waiting for the recommendation from the county. We don't know the exact date that this is going to go to the commission, but it's likely July, June or July. We think July, but we're not sure yet. So we're trying to collect signatures now opposed to this item. And that's what this is.
And then our next code is the Take the Hold the Line Smart Growth Pledge today. So you could take a picture of this code and take the pledge with us today. So there's a yes, B next time, and C if you've already done it. Perfect.
And the pledge just means you think smart growth is the way to go rather than sprawling.
All right. Perfect. And once again, we'll ask the same question we asked before is why is land use and smart growth important for Biscayne Bay health? Did you learn anything during this presentation that's changed your mind from the first time you had this question come up? Text in exactly what you think, what you would like us to see.
If you put A there, we don't know what that is. So you have to type a word.
I think that's the grade for the panel.
Thank you. All right, it's all connected, all interconnected, conserve wetlands, another A. Yes.
What is A, guys? Tell us what A is.
Probably the answer from the last question, but we'll take it as an A+. Right, different types of land have different jobs on landscape. That's a good one. There's only wet seasons and dry seasons, no cement seasons. Very true. Land use and land value drives everything to educate people for water quality. Interconnectivity. Hi. Hello.
I'm glad no one put their phone number on there and said, please call me. Don't do it.
Interconnection. So, ooh, we missed one. Health of South Florida and quality of life. Perfect. And then here is a little comic.
Just a little, yeah, just a little comment. Well, look, thank you to our panelists for coming. I know Laura may have to head out. If we have a minute for audience, 4:25. Okay, we got a few minutes. If anybody has a question, we can do that.
Yeah, we're glad to take live questions because
Hello, everyone. Hello, Elizabeth, Laura. First off, very grateful to all of you guys. I have a question. We've seen many different, let's call them development, conservation fights turn into a situation where you guys are kind of in where you guys are currently litigating. And I'm just wondering from the public perspective, what do you think we should do as community members who are invested in, fighting against these irresponsible projects? What can we do as advocates when a majority of the things that are happening kind of move into this legal space where all of us aren't necessarily fit to participate.
So that's a really good question, because once it goes to court, all you can do is basically raise funds and awareness. If it comes out of the community mind, like it just disappears into the background, and we're having to raise $50,000 for that lawsuit and nobody remembers about it, then we can't be successful, right? Because litigation costs money. So raising funds and awareness and helping to tell people about it or get people to join the coalition is always a great way for you to be an activist.
I really appreciate that question. And I know there's a lot of legalese when it gets to that stage, and sometimes it gets a little bit convoluted, especially when there's multiple avenues of one case happening at the same time. So I second what Laura said. I think just keep talking about it. And I think a really good point that I'm glad you brought up, oftentimes it's not like, oh, the public advocacy part happened, now it's just litigation. If we lose, or oftentimes if we win, it comes back to the county commission very, very often. And so it's not like, oh, we wash our hands of the public advocacy part of that. So continuing to talk to your representatives about it, continuing to talk to your friends, anyone you know about these things, keeps it live. And then if and when we have to deal with this again at the government, at the non-litigation level, you've been doing all this work in the meantime. So yeah, thank you again for that great question.
I have another thing to add that I just thought of. So people run for office all the time in Dade County. You need to make sure you have conversations with them about how this is such an important aspect of the environment.
It's very important that we have those conversations because the people who are filing the applications are having those conversations. So, there needs to be a countervailing force there. Because if they're only hearing one side of the story, then they only think there's one side of the story, or that one group cares enough to tell their story. So that's why it's important for us to make those connections. Just come back to the thing and, make sure we're developing those relationships and, just continuing to pay attention.
Hey everyone, thank you for your awesome work protecting our western wetlands. And my question has to do sort of along the canals. I work on adaptation plans along them, and we see in response to sea level rise, our groundwater's pushing up, and the wetlands that were once drained, it's almost like they're returning again. We're getting like our pre-drainage conditions coming back. Do you see yet any coalition building around, making way for these wetlands that are essentially re-emerging and coming back into our landscape?
So I'll take a first stab at that. Basically, Everglades restoration, when we're looking at what's going to happen over a 50-year period, you're looking at that exact thing. You're looking at that time frame when this piece of property will become a wetland in year 25. And so that's exactly what we're planning for when we purchase a piece of property that today is farmland. We're thinking that's going to be a wetland in 20 years. And so that's why the entire fringe of Dade County is important. And the places where it still exists are so critical for restoration. And frankly, we should be reclaiming areas within the city to, do the same thing so that we can filter our water and hold and retain water. Basically, as we increase the residence time of water before it reaches the bay, we better the quality of it, period.
Yeah, I was just going to add that BBC, we're thrilled that the Army Corps of Engineers is now considering climate change and projections, 50 plus years out. And BBC is actually doing exactly that in the southern end of the system, in the model lands down by the Turkey Point area, thinking about the various ecosystems that exist and how they're going to migrate uphill with climate change and how we can think about what we want those ecosystems to look like down the future. I know that's a different question because you're talking about in the urban environment. And I know you probably know the answer to a lot of these, but just for the larger group, the water management, South Florida Water Management District does an annual sea level rise flood resiliency study and multiple different adaptation studies. I know the county does amazing work. And the Army Corps is also working in the urban environment with the CNSF restudy, looking at these futures. So I'm optimistic to see that. Okay, bye, Laura. Sorry, I was boring you. We're really thrilled to see that all these different government entities are finally looking 50 years ahead and have all these different programs to think proactively about how to answer that very difficult question.
Yeah, agree with everything, by the way. And I think a lot of this needs to get worked into the code as far as development, and green infrastructure needs to be seen as another piece of critical infrastructure for any new development. And we need to get that into the mindset. But what I wanted to ask was more for Maribel, because I think you made a great point that a lot of people here overlook is there's a large segment of our community that doesn't speak English and is arriving here from other places. And how do you communicate with them? How do we educate those people that may have a different approach to their property, their pervious or impervious space? Because we have a lot of projects where we work on where people are totally paving their entire properties. What plan do you have, or is there a plan to reach out to them, and whether it's through radio or TV, and communicate and get the point across to them?
Actually, I was really pleasantly surprised in the last couple of months. There is an ad from the Everglades Foundation on Spanish radio, and it talks about water, just how important water is. That hasn't happened. I mean, I don't remember when the last time that it happened, because even like with the Water Management District, we will just talk about the fact that the project needs to happen, but it wasn't necessarily the impact to you. And the whole thing about outreach is, like I was saying, is okay, this is what's happening. This is how it impacts you. And then this is what I want you to do about it. What happens with people that arrived recently, I mean, it takes a while for people to become aware of things, the whole pyramid issue. And you have to take care of certain needs before you can actually concentrate on even the politics, right? So it's a difficult task, but the general messaging of impact, how does it impact you, and bringing that home, those messages can be developed and try to, permeate the different, social media seems to be what everybody thinks is the most popular one. For Spanish speaking people in Miami, Spanish radio drives the day. Whatever they decide in the morning that is the issue of the day, that becomes the issue in every news program for the rest of the day. So if just more communication, and it takes time, like we're still developing, that awareness issue from people that arrived, let's say 10 years ago. So dealing with the ones that just got here it's a more of a challenge. But I believe the more we just talk about it, the more the concept of what's happening and how it's important to those people that live here, and you live here now, you're part of that. But it's about developing messaging and then having the money to deliver the message and hope that they will receive it, which is the final challenge on any of that. Yeah.
Can I add something really fast? I just love that you mentioned impervious surfaces. The county's actually working on an impervious surface ordinance to cut back on some of the things that you just said, people paving over their entire yards. So that's so important.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this panel. Round of applause. Please connect with them. HoldTheLineCoalition.org, right? Website. Okay. All right.